It was a scorching summer afternoon in downtown Atlanta. The streets were bustling with people, and the traffic seemed endless. Major General Nathaniel Carter, a decorated and highly respected figure in the U.S. Army, was on his way to a charity event aimed at supporting veterans. Wearing his full military uniform, his chest gleamed with medals that told the story of decades of service to his country. He was no stranger to standing out in a crowd. Nathaniel had seen combat in far-off lands, negotiated peace, and led thousands of soldiers through some of the most challenging times in modern history. But nothing could have prepared him for what was about to unfold on his way to a simple event in his own country. As Carter's black SUV approached a red light, he noticed a police car flashing its lights behind him. His driver, a young sergeant named James Lawson, pulled over calmly. There was no reason for concern. Nathaniel hadn't broken any laws, and he assumed it was a routine traffic stop. The police officer, Officer Rick Hudson, a tall, imposing man in his early 40s with a permanent scowl etched into his face, approached the vehicle aggressively, his hand already resting on his holstered gun. Something felt off. Hudson's body language screamed hostility. Lawson rolled down the window and greeted the officer politely. "Good afternoon, officer. Is there a problem?" Hudson's eyes barely registered Lawson. They were locked on Carter, sitting in the back seat in his military attire. "License and registration," Hudson barked, ignoring the pleasantries. Nathaniel, always composed, spoke softly. "Officer, I'm Major General Nathaniel Carter of the United States Army. May I ask what the issue is?" Hudson's eyes narrowed, and the corner of his mouth twitched. "Step out of the vehicle. Now," he ordered, his voice laced with disdain. There was no explanation, no request, just raw authority and something more. Something malicious. Lawson hesitated, but Nathaniel gave a subtle nod. "It's all right, Sergeant. I'll handle this." Nathaniel stepped out of the vehicle, his tall, commanding frame towering over Hudson. But Hudson wasn't intimidated. If anything, the sight of a black man in such a high-ranking uniform seemed to fuel his anger. "You think that uniform means you're above the law?" Hudson sneered, stepping closer, his face inches from Nathaniel's. Nathaniel remained calm. "I respect the law, officer. I've spent my entire life defending it. Now, if you could explain what the problem is, I'm sure we can resolve this." But Hudson wasn't interested in explanations. His anger boiled over. "I don't care who you are. Around here, you follow my orders." Without warning, Hudson grabbed Nathaniel by the arm, yanking him violently. Nathaniel, caught off guard, didn't resist. "Officer, there's no need for this. I'm complying." But Hudson didn't stop. The rage in his eyes was unmistakable. He threw a punch, his fist connecting with Nathaniel's jaw. The force sent Nathaniel stumbling backward, hitting the pavement with a thud. A collective gasp from bystanders filled the air, but no one dared intervene. Lawson, still in the car, reached for his phone to record the incident, his hands shaking with disbelief. "Sir, we need to call for backup," he whispered, his voice trembling. Nathaniel, his face bruised but his dignity intact, slowly got to his feet. Blood trickled from his lip, but he made no move to retaliate. He simply looked Hudson in the eyes, his voice steady. "You've made a mistake, officer." Hudson, pumped with adrenaline, spat on the ground. "The only mistake here is thinking you could walk around in that uniform like you own the place." Before things could escalate further, the sound of approaching sirens filled the air. Multiple police cars swarmed the scene, and the officers inside quickly recognized Nathaniel. They rushed to defuse the situation, horrified by what had transpired. Captain Rebecca Morgan, one of the most respected officers in the precinct, stepped out of her car, her face pale with shock. "Major General Carter," she stammered, disbelief clear in her eyes. "Yes, Captain. Your officer here seems to have misunderstood the situation," Nathaniel said, wiping the blood from his face. Morgan's eyes darted to Hudson, who was now standing stiffly, his face twisted with anger and fear. She quickly ordered her officers to take Hudson into custody. The other officers hesitated for a moment, unsure of how to react. But Morgan's authority snapped them into action. Hudson was cuffed and led away, his protests drowned out by the murmurs of the gathering crowd. As the chaos settled, Nathaniel stood tall, his face bruised but his spirit unbroken. He turned to Morgan. "This is not just about me, Captain. This is about something much bigger. What happened here today is a reflection of a deeper issue that your precinct, your department, our country, needs to confront." Morgan nodded, her expression serious. "You're right, Major General. We will investigate this thoroughly." The media quickly got wind of the incident, and within hours, the footage Lawson had recorded went viral. The world watched in shock as the news unfolded. A high-ranking black officer assaulted by one of his own country's policemen. The outrage was immediate. Protests erupted in cities across the nation, demanding justice not just for Nathaniel, but for all the black men and women who had suffered at the hands of racist officers. Nathaniel, always the leader, took to the airwaves, calling for calm, but also for real, lasting change. His words resonated with millions. "We are not asking for special treatment. We are asking for equal treatment. For the law to protect us as it should protect everyone. I fought for this country, for the freedoms we hold dear. But those freedoms mean nothing if they are not extended to all Americans." The case against Officer Hudson moved swiftly. Public pressure mounted, and it became clear that this was not an isolated incident. Reports surfaced of Hudson's history of racial bias, with complaints lodged against him by several civilians over the years, complaints that had mysteriously disappeared. As the trial loomed, Nathaniel found himself at the center of a national conversation about race, justice, and the very soul of America. He never asked for this fight, but he was determined to see it through, not just for himself, but for every black man and woman who had been silenced, dismissed, or brutalized.